Oh, here you go. Boy. So, on to tonight's topic. The Amanita Muscaria. History, science, and lore. We have all seen this mushroom pretty much our entire lives. The first time you might have seen them might have been on the cartoon show The Smurfs, right? Because the Smurfs were wise, so they built their houses out of the Amanita Muscaria mushroom. You might have also seen it before there was even a show Smurfs. If, let's say in the 70s, maybe your grandmother or grandfather was reading you a fairy tale out of a picture book, we can almost guarantee there's at least one Amanita Muscaria in every fairy tale picture book. So we've seen it a lot, we've seen it our whole lives, and today we're seeing it even more and more because the Amanita Muscaria has sort of stepped in as this universal placeholder for all of psychedelia. It's kind of like the symbol for psychedelics. And since we are in a psychedelic renaissance, we are going to be seeing this so much more. And of course, given that we are nearing the holiday season, or perhaps we're probably in the holiday season, I believe it starts the day before Halloween, almost, or maybe 2 days before Halloween. But usually around this time, we start to hear tales about how this mushroom is tied to Christmas traditions, specifically the character of Santa Claus. Has anybody here heard that before? Mm-hmm. Most people have heard that before. Cool. Well, we're going to get into all that stuff. I first started eating Amanita Muscaria to help with a crippling condition of sleep apnea. If anybody suffers from sleep issues, this mushroom saved my life. For almost 3 years, I did not get a good night's sleep. So I was pretty much walking around like a zombie all day. Just very irritable, how we all get when we don't get good sleep. And it's not just the sleep that's so delightful. The dreams are vivid and lucid at times. And I don't know if anybody here enjoys flying dreams. I do. Okay, flying dreams on Amanita Muscaria is the best thing ever. I highly recommend it. No, because I've always loved flying dreams, like even when I was a kid, right? But I would wake up and I'd be like, it was all a dream, right? But how about Amanita flying dreams? I wake up and I go, fuck yeah! I was flying through the air! That's like you wake up thinking you actually just did it. That's what it feels like. And I find that I'm not like let down or sad or anything. I'm like, yeah, I can do that again later tonight. And I don't know, I love this mushroom. But I love it so much I'm getting a little ahead of myself. So I'm gonna back up a little bit and start with some basic stuff. The term Amanita Muscaria itself is a mixture of a Greek word and a Latin word. Amanita is the Greek word for mushroom, Muscaria is the Latin word for fly. Hence the alternative name, the fly agaric, or I've also heard it pronounced fly agaric. I have no preference in either direction. But what is it? That's what I'm looking for. The point behind it, at least for medieval peoples, they would use this mushroom as a form of pest control. See, the Amanita Muscaria has 2 different chemicals in it that are great for dealing with flies, hence again, fly agaric. What medieval Europeans would do is they would cut the mushroom up, put it in a dish or a bowl of water, and this mushroom has a chemical in it called 1,2-diamine, which actually attracts flies. The mushroom is also water soluble, so the flies get attracted to the water because the 1,2-diamine is in the water. However, what is also in that water is ibotenic acid from this very mushroom that kills the fly. So this mushroom both attracts flies and kills them. And we know that this practice was widespread throughout Europe based on the fly motif found in different languages. So in German, the term is Fliegenpilz, the fly mushroom. In French, it's Amanita, I'm going to mispronounce this, I don't speak French at all, but it's Amanita mouche, which is the fly killer. In Spanish, it's Hongo mata mosca, which literally means mushroom mata kills mosca flies, the mushroom that kills flies. Evidence for human consumption of this mushroom might be quite old, perhaps stemming back to prehistory. Italian researcher Giorgio Sammarini notes cave art of the Amanita Muscaria in Mount Bego, France, which is this one here. Now, truth be told, any of my friends that know me know that I am very skeptical of the idea of mushrooms appearing in art throughout history. I don't really think people were doing that. But it's kind of hard to mistake this for anything else. Another reason why I think it has something to do with the mushroom, does anybody know what the going scholarly consensus of what this is? What this is supposed to be? They say that it's a cow skull.
What?
Good. I was so scared that I was going to come and say that, and you're going to be like, well, yeah, look. Yeah, I don't see a cow skull anywhere. You know what I do see? I see the I see the universal veil. The shape is kosher, and it even has the spots. I still don't see any horns. Like nothing. Nothing about this reminds me of a cow skull, but I have been wrong in the past. Possible evidence also exists for the use of the Amanita Muscaria, potentially dating back 50,000 years ago in Australia. Now, I personally do not find this to be as decisive. I feel like this could be any number of headwear, and this is one of the reasons that I'm skeptical about the idea of mushrooms appearing in art, because people tend to find anything bulbous and then say it's a mushroom. However, I believe that in giving people all of the information and having them decide for themselves. I have a question mark there because I don't actually believe these represent the Amanita Muscaria, but I'm not Australian and didn't live there 50,000 years ago, so I don't know. We do know that today and in the past, natives of Australia were and are very familiar with this mushroom and consider it to be a magical form of lightning that fell to the earth from space. Now, the first major account we have of the Amanita Muscaria dates to the 1700s, and it was written by a Swedish colonel named P.J. Strahlenberg, who had been taken prisoner of war for, I think it was about 12 years, something like that. And he wrote, "Those who are rich among them lay up large provisions of these mushrooms for the winter. When they make a feast, they pour water on these mushrooms and boil them. They then drink the liquor which intoxicates them. The poorer sort, on these occasions, post themselves outside the huts of the rich and watch the opportunity of the guests coming down to make water, i.e. relieve themselves, and then hold a wooden bowl to receive the urine, which they drink off greedily as having still some virtue of the mushroom in it, and by this way they also get drunk." One of the more, what's the right word to use here? Let's say special attributes of the Amanita Muscaria is that it actually gains strength passing through the urinary tract. So eating the mushroom would be strong, but eating the mushroom, peeing it out, and then drinking it is even stronger. I don't know why this is, but it is well documented, and we have very good reason for knowing that this is true. However, because I could see by the looks of some of your eyes, I will answer the question you have in your head. No, I have not tried to drink my own Amanita piss since this morning. Now, one of the more, a few notes to take away from Strahlenberg's account. Did anyone notice anything odd about this passage? Well, that's a weird way to put it. Does anybody notice something, a certain someone missing from this passage? We're in Siberia, we're talking about Amanita Muscaria.
Reindeer?
They're missing. Yes! Thank you, Jenna. Yes, the shaman is missing, right? And there's a good reason for that. Shamans had absolutely nothing to do with a lot of the Amanita Muscaria usage in Siberia. Today, it is often believed, peace out, brother. I'm sorry, I'll drink my own piss.
All
My
right.
bad.
Fine, we'll go back.
Go back to that, great. In our own day, it is simply believed that Siberia is littered, right, with Amanita-eating shamans. That is completely incorrect. Only a handful or a few handfuls of peoples in Siberia are aware of the mushroom's powers. And just to give you an idea of what I'm talking about here, Siberia is gigantic. Siberia has 11 time zones. That's how big it is. You could fit all of the United States, all of Mexico, all of South America, all of Western Europe, and most of Canada in Siberia. It's huge. Of that giant landmass, only about 15 to 20 groups of people are aware and use the Amanita Muscaria, and of those 15 to 20, only about 8 to 10, maybe a dozen, feature shamans who use the Amanita Muscaria. And so when we think about it, maybe this won't work in this room. I was about to say, how many of you know people who eat Amanita Muscaria? But some of you probably do. So let's think about normal people. How many, your coworkers or whatever, how many people do you think they know that eat Amanita Muscaria? Probably very few. Well, that's the same situation over in Siberia. And the majority, again, who use it, do not use it for any shamanic purposes. They use it as a recreational inebriant. I just think these things are kind of important because what we tend to do in the West is invent what people on the other side of the world do. Edward Said wrote a book called Orientalism where he outlines all of this stuff. Well, we tend to sort of be like, oh, that's what you're doing over there? Well, we're going to kind of shape you into what we think you should be doing. But it's not just us. All cultures all over the world do that. Everybody does it. So I'd just like to be clear and honest about who is actually using the Amanita over in Siberia. The anatomy of the mushroom. The Amanita Muscaria is a cocktail of chemicals, but the majority of them are found in such trace amounts that I'm not going to bring them up, and I could not possibly list them all off for you. The four main ingredients which will concern ourselves are ibotenic acid, muscimol, muscazone, and muscarine. Muscimol is the stuff we want. That's the entheogenic stuff. Drying the mushroom converts much of the ibotenic acid into muscimol. However, there's always going to be a little ibotenic acid in the mushroom, even if it's totally dry. But it does balance out the ratio. Like a wet mushroom, like a fresh Amanita, is about a 9-to-1 percentage ratio of ibotenic acid to muscimol. Drying it narrows it down to a 3-to-2 ratio, which is way better. If you want to have entheogenic experiences with it, of course. The Amanita is comprised of three main parts: the cap, the stem, and the bulb. Each section has a different amount of ibotenic acid in it. The cap has the most, the stem has the least amount, and the bulb has the second most amount. For that reason, I use the caps for entheogenic experiences, I use the bulbs for medicine, and I use the stems as a culinary mushroom. They are quite tasty. On this last point, if anyone here has ever wanted to try, has anyone ever eaten Amanita Muscaria just as a culinary mushroom? Cool. Do you do the boiling or just letting it sit in water trick?
I've always boiled.
You do the boil, cool. And your name?
Nicole.
Nicole. So one way to do it is the way Nicole does it, which is you fill up a pot with water, put the mushrooms in, boil for 20 minutes. What's that? Oh, sorry. I'm hearing things. But I also drank some Amanita tea before this. So one of the ways Nicole does it, so you have a pot, put the mushrooms in there with water, boil it for 20 minutes, dump out the water, put in fresh water, mushrooms as well, boil for 20 minutes, and then do that a third time. The way I do it, I've done it both ways, but the way I do it typically is before I go to bed, I just put it in water and put the pot with mushroom water in my refrigerator. Wake up the next morning, change out the water, go to work, which is right here. Do sanctity things and then go back, change out the water again, and before I go to bed, change it out one more time. You do that for between 48 and 72 hours, and that will completely get rid of all of the chemicals in the mushroom, because again, they are water soluble. As for entheogenic use with the caps, unlike psilocybe mushrooms, which interact with the 2A receptors, Amanita muscaria interacts with the GABA-A receptor. For this reason, some people have claimed that the Amanita muscaria is not psychedelic. Has anybody been yelled at for saying that? I certainly have been, for calling it a psychedelic mushroom. Yeah, me too. Yeah. Well, so some people don't think it is because it doesn't interact with the 2A receptor. It's not a big deal. They're just wrong. It's fine, they're just wrong. Now, the reason the Amanita muscaria is psychedelic is because it falls under the umbrella of substances that Humphrey Osmond had in mind when he coined the word psychedelic. At the time, the common term for things like LSD, mescaline, and mushrooms was psychotomimetic, means a mimicker of madness, because they thought that when you took these things, it made you crazy, without realizing they were actually making people more sane. Now, Osmond and Aldous Huxley were trying to get away from clinical terms. In fact, we all know the word hallucinogen, right? Humphrey Osmond also coined hallucinogen, and he deeply regretted it. He did not like that word. When Osmond floated the term psychedelic to Huxley in the mid-1950s, he wasn't talking about chemistry. Various receptor interactions never come up once from either Humphrey Osmond or Aldous Huxley. Psychedelic simply means mind manifesting. That's all it was. It has nothing to do with it. It doesn't mean interacts with 2A receptor, because they didn't care about that. You know what they were talking about in their letters? They're fascinating letters. Brain chemistry doesn't come up. Receptors don't come up. You know what comes up? Possibilities of psychic powers under LSD. The idea of tapping into the mystical potential of the human mind. That's the stuff that they were interested in, and the Amanita muscaria does all of that. Therefore, it is psychedelic. We could just, consider this experience from Clark Heinrich, who after not much luck eating the Amanita muscaria, finally decided to try drinking Amanita-infused piss. In the midst of a great darkness and a great silence, the heavens opened above my head. In an instant, I was flooded with light from above that quickly dissolved everything in its glory. I was taken up and absorbed by the unspeakable Godhead. No longer separate, there was neither an enjoyer nor a thing enjoyed. There was union. I don't know about you, but to me, this sounds like every trip report I've ever read about LSD, mushrooms, or mescaline. There's no difference. I mean, you could just switch out. If you would have said, oh, this is my experience on Golden Teachers, you'd be like, yeah, of course. Right? Well, this is his experience. Again, point is, it's psychedelic. Locating, preparing, and consuming. So, when Eden and I go out mushroom hunting in the autumn, although the season just ended, thank you, Kevin, for those last few mushrooms. I really appreciate that. We bring a little bit of moon blood. I know that we all know what that means. And we pour it upon the earth. We do this whole ritual to the earth. So we need some moon blood. I bring a statue of Gaia, which is this very one right here. Incense burners and incense for the ritual, and cannabis. Because in my opinion, there are few things better than walking through the forest on a gorgeous autumn day with a good friend looking for mushrooms, talking, laughing, and smoking a fat joint. It is such a good time. If you haven't done it, that and then try the flying dream thing. Anyway, point is, when you go hunting Amanita, just bring a little MAGIC. The trash bag, I should say, is that we always clean up the woods. We go there, we do our invocation of Gaia, and then we make sure to get all of the trash out of the park. It breaks my heart that people go to these pristine, beautiful, enchanted places and leave like their trash behind. So Eden and I always clean it up, and we take care of the earth, and then Gaia bestows the mushrooms for us. Now, one of the most advantageous aspects of the Amanita Muscaria is that there are no deadly lookalikes. With psilocybe mushrooms, there's any number of deadly lookalikes. Now, to be sure, there are deadly Amanita varieties, but none of them actually look like the Amanita Muscaria. And when people mess it up, I'm always a little confused, to be honest. Now, the two most off-sided deadly lookalikes are the Amanita virosa and the Amanita phalloides. So we're going to try a quick test real fast. I want to know who can't tell the difference between these two mushrooms. Anyone notice anything striking here? Yes, somehow, believe it or not, when people talk about Amanita poisoning and death, there's actually been very few deaths from eating Amanita Muscaria, even raw. I mean, your digestive system is going to be very unhappy with you, but most of the time when people die from eating an Amanita, it's because they ate the Amanita virosa. Again, I don't know how anybody confused one for the other. Now, the other lookalike is the Amanita phalloides. So we're going to try this test again. Anybody having trouble telling the difference between these two mushrooms? No? Yeah, and look, I even switched the Amanita to the other side just to fool you, and that didn't even work, right? So, yeah, there really are no deadly lookalikes. Now, there is a third lookalike, which isn't deadly, but you don't want to eat it. And that is the Russula emetica. That's this guy. This mushroom won't kill you, but your spouse and your toilet are going to be working overtime if you eat it. Symptoms include nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, and a whole lot of farting. So it's not all that bad. The symptoms don't last very long, but they do last long enough to make you regret ever eating the Russula emetica. So since the Russula is the only one that can conceivably be confused with the Amanita Muscaria, can anybody point out some differences between these two? Was that? Was it?
Does it have a bulb?
Yes, exactly. It does not grow from a bulb. Somebody, I heard no veil over here? No veil. Also doesn't have the flex on top, because those come from the bulb and it doesn't have a bulb.
The Russula is much more fragile than the Amanita.
Okay.
You can crush the Russula in your hand, and it'll be harder to crush the Amanita in your hand.
Okay, thank you. I mean, I don't even bother picking them, so I've never had one in my hand. But no, thank you, Jordan. One thing I will say is that sometimes insects will burrow into these mushrooms, and it can kind of give it a spotted top look. So don't be fooled. Like, from a distance, it could look like the Amanita Muscaria. But check for the veil, check for the bulb, and see if you can squeeze it in your hand or not. And always, always, always remember, especially with mushrooms and mushroom foraging, if you are not 100% certain, do not eat it. Just don't do it. On the Oregon coast, where Eden and I forage our Amanita, there are a few varieties I'd like to outline so that when you go out foraging, you'll be able to recognize them. First, we have the Amanita Muscaria right up here, identifiable by its bright red cap. Right beside it, we have the Amanita pantherina. And this is, we can pass this around. The panther cap is way stronger than the other ones and has more of a brownish color to it. This one here is the Amanita Muscaria var formosa. And it looks like this. You pass that around. That's the one that you'll find the most on the Oregon coast. I mean, you'll find all of these, but this one comes up the most. And finally, we have the Amanita gemetta, which is more of a peach color, and the edge of the mushroom is serrated. Thank you, Kevin, for teaching me that. We went out foraging a few weeks ago. So yeah, these are what you're going to find out there on the coast. I have tried all 4 of these and have not really noticed any discernible difference, notwithstanding the awesome power of the panther cap. It is strong. It's like the psilocybe arborescens of the Amanita group. It's like that powerful. So, as I said earlier, the Amanita Muscaria has to be dried in order to be used. The best way to do it, the best method, is to get it dehydrated. You get it between 40 and 60 bucks, depending on what you're looking for, from a Bi-Mart or a Fred Meyer's. That's really the best way to do it. Second best way to do it is next to a fire. The least goodest way to do it is in an oven, and that's the one that people ask me the most about. Like, can you dry it in an oven? Kind of, but you really have to find that Goldilocks zone, because all ovens are different, and you have to have it hot enough so that it dries the mushroom, but not so hot that it cooks it. I don't recommend using an oven to dry it all. So once they are cracker dry, like this, like you should be able to snap it like a cracker. You want to do 2 things. It's so tasty. You want to do 2 things that will homogenize the dose. The thing about the Amanita Muscaria is that you can't tell how strong it is by looking at how big it is. Whereas if you have a psilocybin mushroom, you can see the blue bruising in it. And if you have a big mushroom with a lot of blue in there, you know that, you're going to Jupiter tonight. Amanita is very different. You can find an Amanita cap this big, and it will have very little ibotenic acid in it. And you can also find one right next to it about this big that is just loaded with ibotenic acid. So homogenizing the dose is important. To do that, the first thing you want to do is separate your caps, your stems, and your bulbs. Next, you want to pulverize them individually. So caps with caps, stems with stems, bulbs with bulbs. This will homogenize the dose for you, as much as the Amanita Muscaria's dose can be homogenized. It's not an exact science, but it is your best bet for finding a dose that works for you and experimenting with it. Like, once you know what your dose is with Amanita, that's kind of what it is. So, moving on to history. It is asserted that Viking berserkers consumed the Amanita Muscaria to give them fearlessness and aggression in battles. Anybody ever heard this before? Yeah, most people have heard this. Now, it's a really cool idea. I love that as an idea. It is, however, constructed in sheer fantasy. The berserkers were not eating Amanita Muscaria mushrooms. This all began in the 1700s, I believe it was 1783, one of those years, by a guy named Samuel Udman. Udman guessed that since the Amanita Muscaria grows all over Scandinavia, that Vikings would have been familiar with it. But I think we can all recognize this as a correlation eating causation argument, which is a logical fallacy. Just because something is there doesn't mean people were aware of it. We have epic sagas, so many epic sagas throughout history coming from Scandinavia, and not a single one mentions eating the mushroom. On top of which, Udman based, his article is all speculation. He said that, well, they must have used the mushroom because they didn't have access to cannabis or opium. That's what he writes in his paper. Well, we know actually archaeologically that the Scandinavians did and have been using cannabis and opium for centuries. So they absolutely had access to them. What, access?
Huh.
Huh. Okay. So they definitely had access to those things. And simply saying that, oh, well, this stuff is found there. I mean, again, mushrooms grow all over this. Well, this state's not a good piece. People really love their mushrooms in this state. Most people in other states, like in New York, where I come from, Amanita grow there, and most people just walk right by them. They have no idea. So proximity to something doesn't mean that people actually use it. And again, he never offered any evidence whatsoever. It's all conjecture. So, as is common in the age of the internet, ideas get shared before they get vetted. Many people point to Udman's article, but it is very clear that they haven't actually read it, because nobody who reads the article is convinced that, that berserkers ate the Amanita. And I don't know, has anyone here ever experienced road rage before? Human beings are very good at getting pissed off without mushrooms. So, like, you don't need a mushroom to get, to smite thy enemy or whatever. That. It's all falling apart now. Now, one of the coolest aspects regarding the Amanita Muscaria in history has to do with its alleged ties to Santa Claus and Christmas traditions. Anybody heard of this? Cool. I love this idea as an aesthetic. I truly do. But like the Viking Berserker warriors, it has absolutely no historical validity. Watt's already upset with me.
I agree.
What's that? So again, I think it's a beautiful aesthetic. We just got our tree up yesterday, and there's definitely going to be dried Amanita on it. I love it, and I love making Amanita wine in the wintertime. It's great. The issues with this hypothesis, however, are numerous, and they all share the same problem. And that is that they all disregard the very clear history we have for how these traditions formed. For example, we are told that Santa's outfit is red and white because the Amanita Muscaria is red and white, right? We've all heard this, or most of us have heard this. Thing is, Santa's costume went through a variety of color changes over the years. Sometimes he's in brown, sometimes it's white, green, and red, sometimes it's blue with brown trim, sometimes it's all yellow, and sometimes Santa Claus shows up with a leopard print jacket and thigh-high boots, so he's like a cougar. The point here is that if the red and white from the costume were really based on the mushroom, we wouldn't have all of this. We would see the red and white right from the beginning. That's what based on something means. It means that, we have this idea and we're basing on that. So that didn't happen. And this was over the 1800s, so an entire century went by. The red and white were only solidified in 1931 or 1932 when Coca-Cola adopted Santa Claus as their spokeself. Now, this character was invented in the 1820s, so literally a century went by without anybody ever associating Santa Claus or his costume with the mushroom. Did everybody just forget? Or do we just have really bad information in the age of the internet? Interestingly, I should also say, as many of you no doubt know, Coca-Cola used to put cocaine in their drink, right? That's where the Coca comes from, right? So there's literally a better chance of a secret cocaine Santa Claus than there is of a secret Amanita Santa Claus, but nobody talks about the secret cocaine Santa. There's no secret cocaine Santa either. These are just correlations and causation, or thinking correlation equals causation. We are also told that the gifts we find under the tree represent the mushrooms that shamans found under trees while foraging in the wild. Again, this hypothesis ignores the many changes that took place regarding gift giving at Christmas. Originally, Christmas trees and Christmas presents were separable. In fact, the trees were hung from the ceiling, and the presents were put on a table in another room altogether. Once the gifts actually started to be joined with the trees, they still were not put beneath them, but instead hung on the branches. Because in those days, gifts were small. They were little candies and nuts, little dolls and little, wooden horses and things. So how did they actually come to be placed under the tree? Well, this is America. It all has to do with corporate capitalism. Yep. With industrialization and the rise of corporate capitalism, gifts started to become bigger. They weren't small wooden figures. Now they were larger sized dolls and hobby horses And all just larger things, right? Because it's America, it's gotta be bigger, right, than everything else. So you can't hang these things on the branches or you'll break the branches. So they said, fuck it, just put it under the tree. It's the same issue with the costume. If we really put Christmas presents under the tree as an echo for Siberian shamans finding these mushrooms in the wild, then we would have just put the presents under the tree from day one. We can do the same thing with Santa's flying reindeer. The claim is made that the reindeer's flight comes from the fact that reindeer eat the Amanita Muscaria mushroom. And they do, that's true. The reindeer in Siberia do eat this mushroom for its intoxicating effects. However, so do squirrels, slugs, bears, and foxes. So to just focus in on the reindeer is to put that one out, is to see that in a vacuum. And say, oh, well, they ate the mushroom, well, so do all these other things. In fact, when Eden and I go foraging on the coast, look, there's no reindeer in Oregon. We see bite marks and teeth marks in Amanita mushrooms. So, and there's no reindeer there. But the biggest issue has to do, it's not even this, because you could still argue, yeah, those things eat the mushroom, but so do reindeer, and that's where the idea came from. Here's the big problem with that. Santa Claus's flight predates any association with reindeer. The first time Santa appears to fly through the air, it's not in a sleigh, but in a wagon. And it comes to us from a book published in 1809 by Washington Irving called The Knickerbocker History of New York. The wagon that St. Nick flies in is not pulled by any animal. So the flight predates the reindeer, meaning that the Amanita Muscaria can't be the reason for the flight. Otherwise, just like the presents and the costume, we would see it right at the beginning, right? Because once again, that's what based on something means. Incidentally, here are other few vehicles that Santa would use before we settled culturally on reindeer. A ship, a car, a bicycle, a horse, his feet, and a pack mule. None of those things eat Amanita Muscaria. The point here is that we can all enjoy this aesthetic, even if it has no historical precedent. Historical precedent has nothing to do with finding art lovely. So I love this motif, and I'm going to decorate the shop in my apartment like crazy with this motif, even though there is no actual history to it. So, if the Amanita Muscaria has nothing to do with the Vikings, it has nothing to do with Santa Claus, does it have any history of use in the West? Yes, it does. While von Strahlenberg, who we met earlier, recorded the first description of Siberian peoples eating the Amanita Muscaria, he is not the first text to reference the mushroom. One of the earliest descriptions we have of the Amanita comes from a German theologian, Albertus Magnus. Now, Albertus gets a lot wrong in a book he wrote titled De Vegetabilis, which just means on vegetation, because he was basing his ideas on outdated medical practices, specifically the four humors theory. So he was pretty much wrong about everything. But he does recognize that the mushroom has intoxicating qualities to it. And later writers like Carlos Calusius picked up that mantle in the 1500s and also said, yeah, people are still using this to become intoxicated. Now, interestingly, in 1615, a French physician named Jean de Nienold mentioned how witches and magicians used two different mushrooms, which he called morel furieux and morel endormate. Respectively, the crazy mushroom, morel furieux, and the sleepy mushroom, morel endormate, otherwise known as the psilocybe and the Amanita Muscaria. He says that occultists use these mushrooms to, and I quote, show the shadows of the underworld. So de Nienold was clearly familiar with the visionary potential of the Amanita Muscaria. In the 1800s, we meet this guy, Dr. Battista Grassi. He's also, just a side note, we know that mosquitoes cause malaria because of this guy. Anyway, sometime in the 1880s, he treated a patient who had eaten the Amanita Muscaria and apparently was having a great time of it, but he just didn't understand what was going on. The guy was loving it. Now, while Grassi marveled over the effects of this mushroom, coincidentally at the same time, Italian vineyards were under attack by two vegetative parasites that I'm going to try to pronounce for you, Pernispora and Phylloxera. If there's any arborists in the room and I said that wrong, please feel free to correct me. Anyway, these are parasites that were attacking the grapevines, thereby diminishing the amount of wine that could be produced and driving up the price of wine for those who could produce it. Well, Dr. Grassi wondered if during the shortage of wine, the Amanita could serve as a substitute for people. He quickly dismayed as he found out that Italian country folk were already quite familiar with this mushroom and had been eating it for generations, some of whom referred to it as cucurosa, the crazy red. Grassi gave the mushrooms to about a dozen people. One man who was suicidal began to feel a general sense of well-being. The Amanita Muscaria actually cured his depression. It's the earliest reference I could find to the use of Amanita Muscaria for mental health was with this guy. Not to say it doesn't go earlier, I just haven't seen it yet.
What was the date on that one again?
This was the 1880s. I don't have an exact date, I apologize. Another young lady came in to try the mushroom, and she just danced and sung under the influence of the mushroom, and then the next day she came back knocking on Dr. Grassi's door saying, yo, you got any more of those mushrooms? I want to do that again. So, moving on to, I shouldn't have done that just yet. The experience. If Amanita Muscaria is psychedelic, but it isn't anything like the psilocybe experience, what is it like? The first major difference from psilocybe I've noticed on high doses of Amanita Muscaria has to do with the environment of the other world or the spirit world or source energy or whatever we want to call it. With psilocybe, I find that I am transported to that other world, that spirit world. I'm no longer in my ritual room in front of my altar. I feel like my soul has ascended to a higher plane of existence. With the Amanita Muscaria, I experience the reverse. I don't go to the other world. The mushrooms bring the other world to me. I'm still in my room, I'm still doing my weird witchy ritual things, but it's all so enchanted. It's almost as if I'm not tripping, the room is tripping. But I'm also tripping. But it's different. A friend of Terence McKenna, I think, described this phenomenon perfectly. Excuse me. It was as if everything were exactly the same, but totally unfamiliar. But it all looked like I knew it to be, except that this world was about a shade or a quantum level off, different in an eerie, profound, and unmistakable way. Yes, that's what it's like. The body high is more akin to drunkenness than the more ecstatic feelings one will get from psilocybin. Although body tingles are common with the Amanita Muscaria, and my ASMR ass loves it very much. It kind of feels like there's a kitty cat inside you that is kneading from the inside of your body. That's, at least for me, that's what it feels like. Now, I think ritual is very important to get the best effects of the Amanita Muscaria. I practice Amanita Muscaria witchcraft on a regular basis and have entheogenic experiences with it. This is why when people say it's not psychedelic, it's like, well, eat some more. You'll get there. Would anybody like to hear an account?
Yes.
So this is the first time I've ever read from a magical journal to anybody. Oh, except Eden. Obviously.
Just Eden.
And now all of them. My first breakthrough goddess experience with Amanita and cannabis. Whoa. All three goddesses showed up. So in my pantheon, I have three main goddesses, Gaia, Hecate, and Kirke. I started to spontaneously absorb all three goddesses at once. Gaia first tapped into my life and consciousness, and I hers. The room burst with radiance, and I was a part of it. I felt myself shining from the inside. Gaia spoke words that I don't quite recall, but I remember a sense of fearlessness about them and feeling beautified by them. Standing up facing my altar, I fell into the deepest meditative state of my life. Sorry, I was writing this while I was pretty deep in, so the writing's a little... My breath slowly slid into deep guttural tones. I think I was throat singing, but I've never throat sung before, so I'm not quite sure what the sensation feels like. But I was meditating on the sound of these deep, primitive, didgeridoo-like sounds coming out of me. Then Hecate showed up, and my deep guttural sounds turned into deep guttural purging. Hecate led me onto a crossroads I've been working on. I purged negative thoughts about myself. Its spiritual intensity was quite unexpected. I thought I was going to go to sleep early tonight. I hadn't planned on this at all. It was spontaneous through the mushroom. Then Kirki showed up, too, and I felt changed for the better. Seeing and feeling and experiencing those negative thoughts spew out of my body showed me that I must change that to ascend. It is holding me back. Oh, how can I forget? See, this is why I have to write this down. For the first time ever, the triple goddess of the mushroom showed up as Baphomet. It was fucking awesome. I'm rocking back and forth, crouched over writing this while I thrust the air with my nether regions on my knees. So I was on the ground just sort of doing that. At no point did I feel any fear, pain, or discomfort. It felt divine. I see flowers in my head. So that was a high dose for me. Yeah, definitely not psychedelic. At all. I'm just curious, would anybody I was thinking about putting a whole workshop together on Amanita Muscaria witchcraft. Would anybody be interested in that? Okay, I'll definitely do it. You I knew.
Tom, can I ask you a question?
Yes, sir.
Why do you think some people want to make the distinction and say it's not psychedelic? What do you think is behind it?
I don't know. I think they just don't know the history of the term. I don't think there's any, malice aforethought or anything. I think that it just people sort of moved into, deep into the chemical and the chemistry aspects of these things, and they started to sort of see them that way, and, I just don't. And the guy who invented the term psychedelic, he was a psychiatrist, and he invented the word to get away from clinical terms, So again, psychedelic doesn't mean interacts with two-way receptor, it means mind manifesting. But I'm not sure, look, I get things wrong, we all get things wrong. Now, the Amanita Muscaria is not all fun. Some of the less desirable effects are things like looping. I don't know if anyone here has ever started to loop on a high dose of Amanita. You have what?
I'm not on Amanita.
Oh, well. So, looping, it's kind of self-explanatory. It's when, while on Amanita Muscaria, a person gets stuck in a mental behavior or pattern. It's really odd. I've had this happen to me. It's like you aren't sure if you did something or not, so you keep doing it. In Kevin Feeney's excellent book, Fly Agaric, he reproduces an account from a man who was caught in an Amanita loop, and this sums it up better than I ever could. I crawled out on a big fallen tree over a pond and, while trying to find a good position, fell off. Then I wasn't sure if it happened or not, so I got back on the tree and fell off again. I kept having a compulsion to complete the fall because I couldn't tell if it happened or was going to happen. That's kind of what it's like. You can also experience a muscarine overdose. Muscarine overdose is not a good time at all. Symptoms include gastrointestinal discomfort, which could lead to vomiting and diarrhea. There's also salivation and perspiration, but that really annoying kind of perspiration, like when your body is freezing but you're sweating bullets, like you're running a high fever. Yeah, it's like that. It sucks. It could also cause dizziness and vertigo, which are self-explanatory, so everybody here knows what those mean. I'm going to end with just a few Amanita Muscaria recipes. And the easiest potion to make is a simple tea form, which is what I am on right now. I have a few friends who will add a little bit of lemon to the water before boiling it. That's supposed to encourage the conversion of ibotenic acid to muscimol. I've never done it. Not saying it doesn't work, but I've just never done it. But I just put it out there in case anyone wants to try it. Anyway, so you boil water as if you're making tea and just add 1 to 3 grams of powdered Amanita Muscaria and steep for at least 10 minutes. Some people will steep up to upwards of a half hour. Before I came here, steeped for 40 minutes. Just like any other kind of tea, the longer you steep it, the stronger it will be. If you're new to it, I would recommend only steeping for 10 minutes. And also, when it's done, you pour it out into another mug through a colander, like those mesh spaghetti things that you put spaghetti. Put one of those out in the mug, dump it in to just get the Amanita flakes out of it. For some people, they do that because those flakes will cause gastrointestinal distress for some people. Me, they don't, but for some people, they do. So just a little precaution. Oh, and sip. Do not gulp. Okay, slow and low is the protocol here. You don't want to have an oops moment. Lord knows I've had far too many of those, and they're not fun. So as far as flavor goes, Amanita tea is it's amazing. Also in the morning, if you mix it with black tea, so just black tea with a little bit of Amanita, let that steep for 20 minutes. It's so good. So good. Now, one thing I've noticed when I drink it as a tea, not with, black tea with it, just straight Amanita tea, is how stimulating it is when compared to the Amanita Muscaria when it's pulverized, which is also absolutely delicious, the pulverized mushroom. So the first night I drank Amanita tea, I thought it was going to knock me out the way the pixie dust. That's what I call the powder does, the pixie dust. I thought it was going to knock me out the way the pixie dust knocks me out. No! Not even close. I ended up staying up all night working on this talk, working on my book, cleaning my apartment. I texted old Nick, you remember that? And it was like the most what's the word I'm looking for? It was the most boilerplate hippie text. I was just like, dude, Amanita tea, man. It was something, right? It was something like that.
I got it right here.
Yeah, it was something. But that was about all I could get out of me at the time. And speaking of old Nick, another recipe that he and I both like very much is mixing powdered Amanita with liquefied ginger. It is so good. Get ginger root, chop it up, throw it in one of those ninja blade things, press the water out of it. You use that mesh spaghetti thing. Press the water out, throw some Amanita in there. It's very stimulating and calming at the same time. It's like I'm active, but I'm chill.
Sorry.
No, you're good. I have actually a whole lot more to say about this mushroom, but this talk will go on all night if I don't stop myself. And I would like to say that next week, we do a microdosing class in here every month. I'm going to be going over microdosing next week, but I'm going to have a focus on the Amanita because there's a whole bunch of things that I wanted to say. But again, this talk would be 3 hours if I did. So I want to thank you all so much for being here, and I'm happy to take your questions.
I'm wondering if anybody's experimented with GABA supplement, and I've taken it. There's some interesting brain things.
Yeah?
And with Amanita.
Together, you're talking?
Together, yeah.
What's the experience like?
Well, I'm wondering if anybody has studied that. Or I just have the GABA, and then you're like, oh, okay, well, GABA receptor. You're like, okay, wow. Maybe
I just have the gift of
You know,
gab.
like sometimes people have like vitamin C, you know, acid or,
Yeah, of course, yeah.
you know.
Anybody here ever tried that? Eating like a GABA pill with Amanita? No? You don't want to tell us what it's like? You're the only one who has in this room. Is it good, bad?
No, I haven't. I haven't done it.
Oh, you haven't? Oh,
No.
okay.
So I've done.
All right, I'll race you.
Separate.
I'll race you. We'll both try it. Cool. All right, well, we'll both try it and get back to it. Anything else? Ayla.
Do you think it would be useful to use a sock slit extractor with this mushroom? Or not really? Sock slit, glassware, boiling at the bottom and then the chiller at the top, and recirculating the mushroom through,
That sounds really alchemical and awesome.
Yeah,
But
that's what I do. I make it, but I have a bunch of Amanita Muscaria, and I don't know if I should put it in the sock slit. But is it alcohol? Are there any alcohol soluble?
Oh yeah, any vodka.
Yeah, are there any alcohol soluble constituents in the mushroom, or is it just water soluble?
It's just water soluble. Oh no, it's alcohol soluble as well. Yeah, I have sitting in my fridge right now. So if you ever make like an Amanita tincture, it's a very easy recipe. It's just fresh mushrooms in vodka in a mason jar in your fridge. You're supposed to leave it in there for about a month, turning it over. Some people leave it in 3 months because that'll make it stronger. I have some Amanita in my fridge that, as of 5 days ago, have been sitting in that vodka for 2 years. So I'm quite sure I have probably the strongest Amanita tincture in the entire United States in my fridge right now.
Okay.
Anything else? Alexis.
So recognizing the myth between the berserkers and Santa Claus is not historically accurate, I'm wondering if there is folklore or mythology that is contextually accurate that where this mushroom shows up. Like, if it's not accurate that Santa Claus is based off of the mushroom, is there a magical folklore story that is directly tied to that?
So there might be, and this gives me the chance to bring up my cat. So my cat is named after a Grecian priestess who ended up being the general for the Athenian armies to unite all of Greece. Now, she studied at the Temple of Hecate, so she was very familiar with psychoactives. King Nopus made her the general, and the enemy was all behind the walls of the city of Eretria. And what Cresemi did was, she fed a bull something. We only have one source for this, and it just says a medicinal herb. And she fed this bull something, and the idea was she brought a sacrifice table out to the middle of the battlefield and ordered the bull brought out, and she was going to sacrifice the bull in honor of the Athenian gods. But she had given it something that drove it absolutely out of its mind, which was the plan. So the bull broke free from the servants that were bringing it out, ran to the enemy side, and they caught it. And so, of course, what they did is, well, we're going to sacrifice this to our gods. Look what happens when you put a woman in charge, right? Oh, but that's exactly what Cresemi wanted. Because whatever she fed that bull passed through the bull into the soldiers and got them all kinds of fucked up. And when she saw them stumbling around in their camp, she went, "Gentlemen, slaughter them all." I believe that she fed the bull the Amanita Muscaria because it is the only substantia that I'm aware of that actually will pass through animal flesh. So in Siberia, some of the groups that do eat Amanita Muscaria and are aware of it, they will wait for the reindeer to eat the mushroom and, have its trip before slaughtering it to have a big feast. So the whole thing is we're going to have a feast and we're going to get, we're going to have a recreational inebriant literally built into the dinner. So I think she used the Amanita.
Does that, if the reindeer eats the thing, and then they kill the reindeer to eat the flesh, the psychotropic stuff stays in the meat after you put it through the fire?
I guess so.
Delightful.
I would imagine so. And we have, reports like eyewitness accounts of people in Siberia watching, different groups of peoples do this, so we know it's legit. Sheldon, you had your hand up, I believe.
Yeah, I've heard that there's interactions with cannabis in that I've heard both that cannabis can potentiate and that if you're on cannabis for a long period of time that it will neutralize the effects of the Amanita. I've yet to be able to verify that.
I personally love mixing Amanita Muscaria and cannabis. I like it. I think it's awesome. That's all I got. I think I saw a hand over here. Did I? Maybe not. No. Ayla, what's up?
Oh, I was just going to ask if you have known anybody who's taken it consistently who've had like negative psychotic breaks, or like has there been people who've just been like?
The only two people I know personally that take it consistently is Old Nick and me.
Oh, okay.
And some people think I'm a psycho, but I think that's exaggerated a little bit. But no, I don't know. Any psychotic effects?
So far, so good.
So far, so good.
He's behaving himself right now.
I don't know, I was gonna make a comment.
Go for it. Just put a question mark at the end of it.
The question mark at the end. Yeah, I think it's, I think this mushroom is, like, the more you can break up your or what your solid beliefs are on what our reality is, and kind of accept this as a dream, the more it can take you to different places. And I think it's interesting that the name is kind of like Amanita Muscaria, because I think it can take you to places where you kind of just like are like, oh shit, like scary.
So they're very mus.
Huh? So they're very what?
They're very mus.
Scary.
Oh, scary.
Yeah. I mean, that's something
Just-
that I observed, because I think it can, it can reveal like the dream that we're in, and kind of like loosen this reality, which you have to integrate that.
Yeah, of course.
So anyway.
Yeah, integration is important. Always
So
integrate.
it could drive you nuts, but if you, I guess, integrate, then you can come back.
Eden? And then I guess you can.
I heard something from Amanita Dreamer about how she used Amanita to help heal her addiction to opioids.
Yeah, benzos, right?
Benzodiazepine, yeah.
Benzodiazepine. Yeah, a friend and colleague of Ina and mine used the Amanita Muscaria to get off benzos. Like, they are a really powerful medicine. Really powerful. And again, I suffer from sleep apnea, and now I don't because of this mushroom. It's just, as our friends, the Seed Sisters over in the UK would say, the Amanita Muscaria is the most gorgeous mushroom in the whole universe. Nicole?
So you mentioned the vodka. How would you use the vodka versus the tea? Are they a similar effect? Or do you have different purposes to you?
Yeah, I don't actually much use the vodka tincture at all. I just sell them. I'm not big, like I still drink every now and then, but it's like very every now and then. So, and I just like the mushroom by itself. Sorry for that awful answer, but I just like it by itself. Sorry.
Did you ever read the thing with Dr. Donald Teeter or whatever, the Ambrosia Society, which he did all this?
I know the Ambrosia Society, but I haven't read the piece you're referring to.
I
Okay.
don't know. Yeah, it's a.
Cool.
Okay.
Chris.
I have sleep apnea, but I'm using a CPAP device. Are you saying that the mushroom is the only thing that you're doing, and that cured it entirely?
Yeah.
And is that, how often are you using
Every
the mushroom?
night.
Every day.
Every night, and pretty much every morning. Once I discover, and I'm going to get into this the microdosing class next week, but Amanita is a huge heart-opening medicine, like big-time heart-opening medicine, and just drinking it as tea in the morning every day, like really, I just feel a lot lighter as I go about my day. Old Nick is shaking his head like, yep. Yeah. Eden?
My theory for the way that it can help with addictions and other, I think that these things are maybe anti-inflammatory. And I thought perhaps that might be why they are an aid for sleep
Could be.
apnea as well. That's
Could
just
be.
my theory, right? off the
Yeah.
bat. But yeah.
I apologize. I'm way more into history and witchcraft than I am chemistry. So I don't really know too much about that. I'm a little out of my element with that.
There's still a lot we don't know.
I guess I was just asking. I do know somebody who had an experience taking microdosing protocol who had a really difficult psychotic break experience, and it was very bad for that person. So I don't know. I guess I was just like, but if you only have the sample size of 2,
Yeah.
you get like
Yeah.
what's this then?
And it was microdosing?
Yeah, it was,
Really?
well, it was Amanita Dreamer's protocol. that they were-
Really?
Yeah.
I'm not familiar. What's her microdose
I
protocol?
don't know.
No, okay. I tried to buy her book and she was sold out, which is great
Yeah.
because she's awesome. But yeah, I'd love to get it for the shop too.
I can bring it
Cool.
to your class that you had. You can read it from the book.
I'll read it right from the book. Any other questions? Yes.
So Tom, you said the way you prepare the Amanita Muscaria, you do about 3 to 4 water changes in the fridge, and then you dry it from there.
Yeah, I just put it just like with after you cook bacon, you just put it on some paper towel.
Right.
Then I just cut it up, throw it right in the cast iron with butter and diced garlic, and that is all you need, and it is so good.
And about how much would you consume as the beginning dose?
Oh, that's just for culinary mushroom.
Oh, that's for palm.
Yeah, I just eat it because it tastes so good.
Okay.
As far as first dose, the first dose isn't a dose at all. I sat with my jar of Amanita for about 6 or 7 months and just meditated and sung to it for like about half a year. Because and this is stuff that I'm going to get into next week, you really have to form a relationship with the Amanita Muscaria. It is not like psilocybin. You have to, and she will speak to you when she's ready. And don't go, oh, why were you talking? Just be chill, breathe into it, breathe in that mushroom. Do it for about 6 or 7 months. I would play my guitar to it. I'd sing to my mushrooms. You want to form a relationship with them and then start very slowly. I think one of the problems people have is that our bodies are not used to the Amanita Muscaria. Like when you eat it for the first time, your body has never experienced anything like that. So that's why people tend to get sick. I take pretty large doses. I've never gotten sick from Amanita. Except this one night when I mixed things, and I don't necessarily blame the Amanita for that. That was just me being a moron. But getting back to your question, sorry, which was, my apologies.
I was confused. You cleared it up.
Okay, great. Yes?
Oh, I was just going to comment that if the Amanita worked for your friend for benzodiazepine withdrawal, it might be because you mentioned that the Amanita works on the GABA with GABA receptors, and so do benzos.
Oh, okay. Yeah, there you go. Oh, we were talking about the first dose. So yeah, sit with it for a while, sing to it, massage it, just kiss the jar, let it know you're there. Then start off very, very small. At night as a powder is really good. Again, the dreams are phenomenal. And then I just slowly built up over the years. I did the same thing with solanaceous plants, the hexing herbs, things like henbane, belladonna, and mandrake. The first time I inhaled henbane, belladonna, and mandrake was in 2005, and I almost killed myself because I took like not a lethal dose, I'm still here, but what could have been a lethal dose of it. Now today, I can take higher than that. I can take a dose that'll kill a person, but I'll have an entheogenic experience because I built it up in my body slowly over time. Yeah, these are different from like LSD, these guys. You really have to form a relationship with them. I think I saw another hand.
Doctor,
Sir.
maybe everybody here knows the answer to this already. Can you eat dried mushrooms that you've had for a very long time, meaning it's been sitting there for a couple of years or whatever?
How has it been sitting there? Has it been sitting on the back patio with the sun hitting it, or is it in a jar with salt bags in the basement?
in a very small jar on a shelf. I mean, it's not been.
Does the sun
cared
hit it?
for in- No.
It'll lose its potency over time, but year and a half, 2 years, as long as it's properly dried, like it can crack or dry, like you can snap it like a saltine, it'll be fine.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. My other colleague, Bob Amasha, who wrote the book Microdosing with Amanita Muscaria, says that the mushrooms go bad after about 8 months. That has not been my experience with them at all. I've eaten mushrooms Amanita that I've had for like 2 years and gotten a very desirable effect out of it. I believe I saw a hand over here. Yes, sir.
I just want to share an experience. One time I was able to harvest a bunch and they didn't have a dryer. So I chopped them up and put them in the freezer. And then whenever I wanted some, I pulled them out, boiled them for 20 minutes, and put them in the Vitamix and a little honey and what have you. Had a good experience.
Cool. Yeah, I've heard some people do freeze their Amanita. I've never done that, but I hear that it's totally fine to do. I wouldn't have thought it would be cool. Like when I was first asked about it, I'm like, no, you can't freeze it as a mushroom. It's, there's too much water in there, like no, apparently you could freeze them and they're fine. Anybody? Yes, Lance.
How much do you take the powder before that?
So I don't ever really know. I don't measure it out. I do an invocation to the 3 goddesses of my pantheon, and each one of them gets some Amanita offered up, and I eat some as well. But the ritual also involves belladonna and cannabis, but mostly Amanita. And I don't. One of the things that people ask that comes up a lot, like how much do I take, and it's like I don't really ever know, because when I'm in the thick of it, if Gaia tells me to eat more mushrooms, I just do it. Like I don't say no to goddesses. It's just seems silly to me. So she'll be like, have some more, and I'm like, no, and I'll just see it. So I don't ever know how much I eat. Don't do that. Don't do that. I'm cavalier in a way that you should not be.
But when you say start small, do you have like an idea of like what small looks like?
Yes, absolutely. Great question. Like teaspoon, half a teaspoon.
Cool.
Yeah. Oh, I should have brought my powder up. I could have just showed you. Like, oh, there you go, like this.
Dried or powder, like dried whole mushroom or powdered mushroom?
Dried mushroom pulverized into powder.
Got it.
Edith?
So just to be clear, the most effective way that we've been handling them is to get them in a dehydrator, put them in there for like 8 hours on 165 degrees for like 8 hours and that makes them all bone dry.
Yeah.
And then pulverize them. Yeah. And
pretty much
homogenize them.
Yeah.
Yeah. And to boil them is going to take out all of it's great for culinary mushrooms, but it's not going to give you any effect. Right.
To boil them. Anyone else? Well, thank you. Well, oh, yes, Nicole.
Have you ever tried soma?
Well, we don't know what soma was.
Well, the theory is that it's Amanita fermented to almost 100% muscimol converted.
Yeah. So do you know, are you familiar with Chris Bennett's work? He's a absolutely brilliant cannabis historian, and in his book, Cannabis and the Soma Solution, he clinically eviscerates the argument for Amanita as soma. He does a tremendous job with it. The most likely candidate for soma is actually cannabis.
And ephedra.
Yeah, well, in certain parts, yeah. Cannabis, ephedra, and opium in the, I forget the name. It's this archaeological dig. They dug up the vats where they believe soma was made, and it tested positive for cannabis, opium, and ephedra. According to the Rig Veda, I mean, so many parts of the Rig Veda that describe soma make it clear that whoever wrote it is not talking about a mushroom. I mean, they talk about leaves.
What about having taken like the what she thinks is soma.
Oh, that I've never tried that. I have the instructions on how to make it, but I've never actually tried to make it.
Is it with raw milk and it's like a yogurt? Is that the thing?
There's maybe we're talking about different things. There's like where, yeah, it's this crazy. Again, I'm not a chemist. Like I just like to eat mushrooms and do witchcraft. That's more my jam. What?
Did you mention ephedra as a hallucinogen?
No, as an additive to, possibly as an additive to soma.
Oh, okay. Because Sudafed, I thought was pseudoephedrine, if I remember right.
I don't know much about Sudafed. I got off that shit many years ago.
There's an herbal tea that you make from ephedra that has.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
That's where they synthesize pseudoephedrine from.
Gotcha. Oh, I didn't know that. Yeah, I hear that ephedra is like a stimulating aspect to it, from what my understanding. But I've never tried it. Anything else? Well, thank you all so much for coming out to this. Hope to see you next Wednesday at the microdosing class, and in January, our friend Ericat, the Hedonist Health, is going to be giving a talk on
harm reduction. Food is harm reduction. So
food is harm reduction.
You can party and still replenish your body after you abuse it with drugs.
Yeah, and she's really smart and really awesome, and yeah, I think you'd really dig her.
She's a genius.
She's yes, I agree with Quinity. She is an absolute genius and just a gem of a human being, you know, to boot.
When is that?
January 20th. 20th. It might be, so we just acquired a venue